To migrate data between two Excel files with Power Automate is an easy task when you are working with tables. However, if you want to be format agnostic and easily automate these migrations in a quick, costless, and simple manner, you can rely on Office scripts. If you have never heard about Office scripts before, imagine it as a VBA for the web version of Excel, which is also easily integrated with Power Automate. So let's get started, and here we work with two Excel files, the origin and the destination. Here in the origin we have this risk matrix and this risk legend, and this data is intentionally not formatted as a table. The idea here is to extract only the values from this risk legend and then write it to the destination file in a range that we define during this process. So for each of these tasks, the data exporting from the origin and the data importing into destination, we will need two separated Office scripts, and we will tie these two operations into a single process with Power Automate. So if this is the first time you are working with Office scripts, I will leave some links to a few blogs I wrote about this topic in the video description, and also to the Office Scripts Gallery, which is a website that I recently launched containing script templates that you can use to automate tasks that are currently not covered by the default Excel connector in Power Automate. And in addition to the templates, you can also find here some resources to get started with Office scripts from zero. So back to the origin file, I'll click the Automate tab, New Script, and Create in Code Editor. And then you have this TypeScript code over here. TypeScript is a very popular programming language that can be used for many things, including automating tasks in Excel. And here we have this function main, which is the place where everything happens inside Office scripts, and the code corresponding to all the operations that you want to execute inside your workbook will be placed between these two curly brackets over here. And instead of building this script from scratch, I'll simply come back to the Office scripts gallery. I'll filter the resources by the import export category, and I'll then select this read data from range simplified. So here I'll have a quick description on what exactly this script is doing, and then I'll have the code right at the bottom. I can copy that, come back to the origin file, and paste it to my code editor. Another thing that I can do is simply to change the script name to something more meaningful, like read data from range. And before we test the script, I just want to clarify what is actually happening here behind the scenes. So in Office scripts, as I already said, everything happens inside the function main between these two curly brackets here. And in the parentheses, you have the parameters or the inputs to this main function. So here we have the workbook, which is a default input for all Office scripts. Make sure to never remove this workbook input since it will cause problems to your script. Then next we have the sheet name, which has a string data type. And here we are expecting the user to provide the name of the worksheet from where the data must be read. And finally, we also have the range address, which also has a string data type, where the user must inform the address of the cells to be read by the script. These two inputs, they were defined by me when writing this code. So if you come back a few seconds in this video, you'll notice that only the workbook parameter was here when you created the script. And these custom parameters are important so we can prompt the user to provide the sheet name and the range address when they execute this script here in the workbook or in Power Automate. Then here into the line 7, we are accessing the workbook element, and we are reading the worksheet from the file that matches the sheet name. It means the input provided by the user when executing the script. This worksheet element is stored in a variable called ws, and then line 5, we are taking the same worksheet reference, here represented by the ws variable, and we are accessing a range based on the range address provided by the user when executing the script. And then we are finally accessing the values from the cells occupied by this range. And lastly, we are returning as output a 2 dimensions array like this. It means an array that contains another level of arrays as its elements, where each inner array will correspond to a row from this range. And we'll see exactly what it is look like in a few minutes once you run this script from Power Automate. So now I'll just save the script again, and this is already good, so I'll come here to the destination file and I'll repeat the same process for creating a script. So I come to the Automate tab, new script, create in code editor, and then here I'll just come back to the Office scripts gallery. We'll select again the import export category and now select this write data to range simplified. I will copy this code, paste that here in code editor. And here we have three inputs in addition to the workbook. So the first and the second ones, they are very similar to what we already had for the origin script. Here we are expecting a name for the worksheet where the data must be stored and the address of the destination range. And differently from the origin script, we also have here the stored input, the range values, which expects the actual values to be written to this file. One difference that you can notice from the other two inputs is that here we have these two pairs of square brackets after the string, which means that here we are expecting two-dimensional array of strings matching the exact same format of the data exported by the origin script. Now for the logic, we are here again accessing the worksheet that matches the name formed by the user. And at line 10, we are taking the values provided by the user and writing it to the range address, also dynamically informed when running the script. And then as a final step here, I'll just rename the script to something like 02 write data to range. I'll save that. And now both scripts are good, so let's go to Power Automate to bring these two operations together. And here I have a very simple flow with only three steps. I have the manual trigger to start this automation, followed by a run script action to read data from the origin file, and then a second run script to write data to the destination file. Here in the origin, I already populated the action with the information about the file from where I want to read this data, and selected my script number one. And here you can see these two input fields here that match exactly the parameters defined for the main function. If I change the script here, for example, you will see that the input now will disappear or change, and that's because those parameters were customized for this specific script. And then here I can enter the data to be used by our script in the origin file. So for the sheet name, I'll simply say sheet number one, and then for the range address, I'll say C12 and 17. Which is exactly the range occupied by this risk legend. And then I can do the exact same thing for the destination file. So here I'll inform the destination worksheet, the range, where I want to save this data to. And for the range values, because this is expecting a two dimensions array, the format looks a little different from the other two inputs. So for this case, I'll not write down any value. I'll actually use a reference to the data retrieved by the origin script instead. So for doing that, I'll click this small icon at the top right corner to switch the input type to an entire array. And I will enter here the dynamic content referencing the body result property from the origin script tab. So now this flow is already good, so simply save it. So the flow is saved, and I already have here a previous run from this same flow into this other tab, so I'll just resubmit it. And after a few seconds, the flow ran successfully. If I now come here to the origin script and access the raw outputs, I will see here under the result property the two dimensions array matching all values read from the Excel file, and this is exactly what I used as an input to the second script. So whatever is the existing value in the original file would be automatically sent to the destination one. If we now go to the destination file, we will see the data migrated from the origin here at the same range that we specified when configuring the flow. And as I said at the beginning of this video, we migrated here the values only, so without any formats, but it would be possible to extract the origins range, colors, borders, font, and any other formats by adding some complexity to this process.